Okay, hello, Jonathan. Welcome to our conversation about creativity and the soul. And as I was sharing with you, I wanted to invite you to have a talk about creativity and how it connects to the soul because you're one of the most creative people I know, and it feels like there's just this burning fire that wants to move through you at all times and come out in different
Mm.
manifestations of form. Um, So I just wanted to tease apart a little bit about your access to soul and spirit and creativity and what it means for you. And we'll
Mm.
see where we go with the conversation, meandering. And I
Great.
also would love for you to talk about your album that you're creating or have
Mm.
created.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, excited to meander dialogue about this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you want to share a bit about who you are in case people are watching this that don't know who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. Who am I? Uh yeah, I would say I'm someone who's in the realms of creativity and leadership and yeah, soul initiation work, which I'd say is really a lot of my life kind of started with various gigs and jobs and always like quite a strong um sense of yeah that burning creativity and kind of led me to the realm of transformational work and different group explorations and communities and yeah I'd say now I'm really in the place of soul initiation work. I'm a big part of Hyde Temple, a place in New Zealand where we're doing 2 6-week trainings a year and yeah, deep in the exploration of new forms of leadership and power and what does it mean to really live and embody a soul-based culture. And so my work is very much in those realms and a lot of the mystery school work and
Mhm.
yeah, I'd say the kind of the edges of exploration of what it means to start moving toward a culture that's really more valuing of the soul and um yeah, what does that mean for this time on Earth, for these unknown times collectively, and also just in our own beings, with community, with ourselves individually? So
Mm.
yeah, exploring that in some fashion.
Yeah, can you dig into a little bit about what you mean by valuing the soul?
Yeah, yeah. I feel there was this place always as a kid growing up that you know, I think many of us have our own version of that, of always having this feeling like I'm living in a culture um that feels like my heart registered very early on that there's something missing
Mhm.
and I think that that missing thing feels like it's also the most essential thing and whether you call that divinity or the soul or um creativity or the inner life, for me moving toward a culture, and it's funny even saying moving toward because I feel it's kind of a remembering but essentially just yeah, the value of what's often invisible in our
Mhm.
hearts and the thing that I feel we can lose or we need to hold on to very fiercely in our own journey, or if we don't come from the right influences or even have the right moments with people
Mm.
that really encourage that quality of who we are from the inside out, almost like a plant, I feel that piece of what is the invisible flowering and blooming inside of each human that really takes time and a level of love and sight from others around and the world around to really let that gift unfold
Mm.
and to have that be more important than survival. I feel like that's the valuing the soul thing
Mm.
when I yeah, what I mean when I speak of that.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And I wonder actually, in a more personal way, did you have
Mm,
a teacher or somebody in your life who kind of plucked you out as someone who was very creative, or was it an organic upwelling that
mm.
then found its way?
Yeah, I feel there were definitely people in my life. in a way, I feel like that the 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 reminder of the importance of creativity and vulnerability, which I feel like go hand in hand. But I feel that, yeah, that value of what lives inside my heart really matters, and storytelling really matters, creativity,
Mm,
the imagination. I feel like, yeah, my parents in their own way had traces of that encouragement, and
mm,
also my grandfather with his typewriter. I can remember a couple professors as well. Also a therapist I saw when I was a
mm,
teenager, because I was quite a rambunctious, rebellious, angry teenager. So I got sent to a therapist when I was like
mm,
15 or something. And yeah, in a way, I feel like an amalgamation of all these characters felt like the teacher. And in some way, I
mm,
feel like it's hard to look back and go, oh, it was this person and that
mm,
person, because even with my grandfather, he had this typewriter, and I kind of feel connected to the myth of the writing and the typewriter and this old like mythical landscape in his study around these encouraging words of
mm,
make sure you write, make sure you tell stories, make sure you stay connected to myths. But I don't know if those were things he actually said to me. I feel
mm,
like
mm,
oftentimes there were the people who were clearly the ones who caught me at a certain time, and then there were just the kind of the mythical cues from the environment and the world around me. So I'd say,
mm.
yeah, combination of those things.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it reminds me a lot of my mum. I think
Mm,
in her own way, she played such a foundational role in me accessing my
mm,
magic and um, flourishing my creativity. Some of my favorite, happiest childhood memories is I went to this little village school where there were 5 people in my year group, and it was just a tiny school with about 20 people in the whole school. And the library bus would come whenever, I can't remember, once a month or whatever it was. And I used to just get so stoked about this library bus. And
mm,
my mum would take us to the library every Monday after school. And I do, everywhere I go, I kind of source a library. I remember when I moved to New Zealand and I was so gutted after 6 months that the
mm,
really beautiful library in Wellington closed down. Because there's something about going into a space that feels sacred with that
mm,
like smell of the books and the kind of myth of the typewriter, like you're saying, like this place of just study and imagination that I just used to get lost
mm,
in and be in such a transaction of reading so many books. And that really set me up, I think, for my life, where she always used to
mm,
say, you'll never be bored if you read a good book. And I love that. I really still connect with my family around books and reading. And we also
mm.
used to tea stain paper. She used to take me to all these National Trust houses and old castles.
Right. Wow. It's
And
wild. Yeah.
yeah, in England and all the old abbeys and we'd
Mm,
go around the gardens and yeah, we would tea stain paper and make parchment. And I would buy quills and ink from all these old National Trust homes. I was such a dork. I was such a like
mm,
little shy, imaginative child. And I would write letters with the quill and ink and then have the candle wax stamp and stamp them and then
wow.
yeah, throw them out the window and as if I was in Harry Potter and just so many
I
different
so see you doing that. It's just very, yeah, makes sense you did that.
and I just yeah, I feel so grateful for my mum never said, be a writer or be an
Mm,
artist, but the actions of how those parts of me were not only
mm,
accepted but deeply celebrated in my life when I was younger have played a really foundational role for me.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah, I kind of lost it, in my teenage years and my 20s, but it's come back round again as I've connected more to my magic.
mm.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it yeah, it brings back a lot of memories too, of being a kid and just feeling these little acts of creativity like that, where, yeah, as you're saying, it's not necessarily like the person was even saying be a writer or giving me clues of who I needed to be, but it was almost like I was brought into some tradition that felt really ancient. And I feel a lot of times in what was that book that like that James Hillman book, The Soul's Code, which I feel is such a amazing. I mean, he was such an amazing man. I feel like that book is just the book to read if anyone wants a taste of like what is the soul and what is it, where does it stem from a world that's become so based on Western psychology and individuality, and in him, being at some peak in his psychology career around
Mm.
realizing, yeah, why are we not focusing on this inner life and on this inner blooming, and yeah, when you're sharing those memories, I feel him and there of the way he always speaks
Mm.
about, the soul having its own mythical language, and it speaks in
Mm.
archetypes and symbols, and there's no, yeah, it's not even really a human to human thing, but it happens
Mm.
between humans in a way. And so I
Mm.
just feel that, yeah, the beauty of these seemingly mundane moments that happen growing up, like the letter writing and the stamp, and somehow
Mm.
it wakes something up that
Mm.
recognizes something very ancient, actually.
Yeah, totally. And I've had that so much with books. I can see
Mm,
throughout my life how characters in books have helped me see myself. There was I'm just like showing my immense Britishness now, but there's these Enid Blyton books and particular characters. And I actually wanted to go to the school I ended up going to because the character in this book played lacrosse and I wanted to play lacrosse at this school. And um Joe from Little Women, like there was an
oh
androgyny
yeah.
about Joe
Mm,
that I saw myself in. I always wanted to dress up as a boy, and whenever it was like
mm,
character day or whatever it's called at school, where you dress up as your favorite book character, I would always go as this character that's like wears boys' clothes. And I remember the
mm,
night before going for a walk with my mum in the cow field and covering myself with mud to be this character and just going to school the next day looking like Stig of the Dump. But yeah, and I remember reading a Maggie O'Farrell book, who's an Irish writer, quite
mm,
recently, actually, maybe in the last 5 years, and it's a fictional story of Hamlet, Shakespeare's son,
mm,
and the mother in that book is a herbal witch, and she keeps it under wraps.
mm,
And I just felt so seen in this character. It really
mm,
ignited this herbalist in me that hadn't had any airtime
mm,
as an adult. And yeah, I
mm,
think I often hear people that recommend, if you're a writer, you have to read, you have to write, and you have to read. And I'm so grateful for the fact that I've been such a voracious reader through my life. And
mm,
yeah, I feel quite inspired to be reading more fiction actually, because I've spent so many years deep in the
mm,
esoteric and everything being about education around the soul. And now
mm,
I'm interested in kind of coming back to that more fiction-based love of mine and seeing it
mm.
with new eyes. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, same actually here in the last year. It's been such a return to fiction and such a longing. I mean, definitely over the last years, even though, yeah, I'm like bathing in esoterics and nonfiction a lot, there's just been this longing to return to fiction, and um yeah, I'm almost done rereading his Dark Materials,
Mm.
which just to me is so like one of the most timeless myths ever. And yeah, yeah, in some ways I think reading a good novel is like one of the best ways to get in touch with the soul,
Mm.
especially in quite wild times like the ones we're living in. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah. And
Totally.
also just to say too, I feel like we share that love like for the coffee shops, and they use like the
Mm.
dusty old bookshops, and yeah, always going to new cities. It was always like go to the local coffee shop, find the secondhand bookshop, because those were the places that I just trusted I could actually find the reality of what lived underneath the culture, as opposed to just
Mm.
what I see on the surface in the cities. So um yeah, that tradition is so strong in me ever since I was a
Mm.
teenager. Just go to the coffee shop, go to the secondhand bookshop, and something magical is bound to happen there.
Mm. Yeah, totally. There was always a feeling of me when I lived in London. I would just feel calm walking into a bookshop.
Yeah,
I would just
yeah.
have this feeling of peace and calm come over me.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So I'd love to ask you a little bit about your creativity and the stream that lives in you. and
Hmm.
what it's sourced from and how you access it and anything you feel to share about your creativity.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like it's one of those things that you know, it has always come quite easy in a way. Like
mm,
I feel something in me has always been very confused. Like some part of me gets it, but another part has been confused around the struggle to be creative, or whenever I hear someone say I'm not creative or I can't do this, or part of me just doesn't buy it. That
mm,
there's something in my cells that I feel has that knows creativity and knows, yeah, human cosmic artistry that I feel like I learned that way before I learned how to like healthily manage money or have a
mm.
how many carbs I need to like so many things in the realm of matter. I feel creativity has always felt like the most obvious thing of the human material plane since as long as I
Mm,
can remember. And
mm,
yeah, I remember I was playing like a little house gig with my guitar and me down south many months ago, and somebody was like, "Can you just share with us like where the songs come from?" Or and I just, yeah, find I don't often talk about that. I'm not even often asked that question, like where's the creativity source
mm,
from? Um, but I feel it's a yeah, I feel there's a constant sense in me that our contribution and our purpose and our livelihood and our worth like comes from some constant role between the inner and the outer and the
mm,
invisible and the visible, we existing within these forms that have been created for good reason at a certain time, but now I'm here alive in a time where I'm existing within these houses and systems and structures that make up this thing we call civilization. And and there's just always this sense in me that like I'm part of a much larger creative act. And I think
mm,
on a level of soul culture, it's there's all this talk of the soul being group conscious, and I feel that all the time. I feel like I felt that since I was a kid, that one part of me could feel in rebellion and irritable around how materialistic culture feels, and like you know why does something feel angry in me that I like worked in this startup or this job, and I'm putting aside money in my 401k for this time that's like 50 years in the future, like doing all these things that apparently are supposed to make me happy, and I'm seeing all these role models of people who are living life a certain way,
mm.
but there's always a sense that like I'm supposed to destroy those those systems, or like I don't really, it doesn't really work for me.
Mhm,
And so just that silent recognition of I'm part of a much larger creative act, because many humans and many creative ideas and inventions and moments that have risen and fallen in culture have come long before me, but I think a part of me knew very early, like, well, I'm still part of that bigger storybook of Earth, of
mm,
humans on Earth.
mm,
So surely my life is a creative process, and surely that creative process is part of a much larger process, and I'm just not really taught about that, and that made
mm,
me really angry and confused and sad, and that inherent sense of inspiration, like where am I sourcing my creativity? I feel like first and foremost comes and came from this inherent recognition in me that yeah, my life is part of a much larger creative process underway.
mm,
And and yeah, I always felt like a black sheep, feeling like I was in high school and everyone seemed like they were 16 going on 50, and like couldn't wait to just like settle down and be a lawyer because their father
mm,
said that's. and 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 I think when something really started peaking in me was when I knew from a young age, okay, I'm creative. I guess I'm an artist, whatever the fuck that means. And I'm writing poetry, I'm journaling, I'm learning guitar from my dad, I can sing, but but the more that I pursued that creativity and felt for me like the real peak of that in my teenage years going into university was like film and theater,
Mhm.
and that's how I spent most of my teenage years. I had my parents sign a work permit when I was 15 so I could work at the local independent cinema and just like immerse myself in the world of cinema and spent
Mhm.
probably, I mean, yeah, I watched thousands and thousands of films, just immersing myself from like, films from the 1920s all the way up until now, and just wanted to drink in like all the different ways that humans were expressing myth and storytelling through film. And then that turned into majoring in film and university and theater and visual arts and writing and playwriting, directing. And then I remember hitting a point where I was in my early 20s, and and the things I were writing started to get a little attention and like off Broadway in New York, and I had a producer, and I started to get involved with that creative world. And then something in me one night just imagine what my life would be if I was just like a playwright, or if I was, and I feel like I could have done that. I could have entered the world of theater, but then something in me was like, but even that's not it. Like there's
Mhm.
something about our inherent creative nature, and the people who recognize themselves as creative, I think also know that it doesn't just belong to individuals. Like
Mhm.
I always felt like it was a bit of a lie that certain individuals would rise up over time, and like Bob Dylan and different people. But I feel like the artist always rises up at a time because they just happen to express things that the collective doesn't know
Mhm.
how to say yet. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I feel like that's when things started changing in my life, where it was like, okay, I think I can keep zooming out and trust that if I just keep following this thread, like the deeper questions for me are around culture and civilization, and like any new economy system or new forms of leadership or new education, like surely it doesn't come from people trying to deduce from ideas, like, but like surely that too can come from wildly creative beings
Mhm.
who emerge as that and take the risk
Mhm.
to be quite radical in
Mhm.
recognizing that the systems and structures that we're in are now beginning to break, and like knowing somewhere that there's a puzzle piece inside of us that carries new codes and models for that. So
Mhm.
yeah, so in a way I feel like that source in me was always just, it doesn't sleep, like it doesn't ever end in me. There's, to my detriment sometimes, like it's just a never ending stream. And yeah, something in me that doesn't just conceptualize it or believe it, but like something in my bones just knows that this fire in me is not, yes, it's for me to express, but it's just the thing that makes us most human, that somehow civilization has forgot and just lopped it into the category of artists.
Mhm.
But I feel like everyone's an artist and just doesn't know
Mhm.
it yet. And
Mhm.
whether that's naive or whatever, I don't know, but I feel
Mhm.
it. I've always felt it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so many avenues I'd love to go down. Um,
Mm,
one is this idea that artistry, or well, all of us actually, but life
mm,
coming through the artist, is so connected actually to the world around us with regards to astrology, for example. So many of the great
mm.
artists have died when they're 27, and that's the
Yeah,
time
yeah.
of the Saturn return, which is a
Mm,
peak transit. And yeah, there's a question I've always had, or I think the collective has, of why is great art always made by the beatniks and the drug addicts and the people who live on the fringes. And that's
mm,
not necessarily true, but there's this kind of archetypal like outsider. And
mm,
part of it, I think, is that the outsider has disentangled themselves enough from conditioning and the fortress of how life should be, like you mentioned,
mm,
to be able to see through form.
mm,
Because when you go and see a really mainstream, like stand-up comedian, they're funny. Comedians are funny because they say the thing that everyone is thinking, but no one's got the guts to say or
mm.
doesn't know how to say it in the way that they word it. And that's
Yeah.
what I love about like sharp British humor or dry
Mm,
wit. It's like everybody's thinking that thing, and you like, and then that person just said it, and it's funny because it pops the tension of like, oh yeah, that person is doing that thing or whatever.
mm,
And I think that's the case with so much great art is made from a place of being able to stand back and see the world around us through new eyes. But they're not actually new eyes, it's just like unfogging the lens of what a lot
yeah.
of us see. And that's why great art is so resonant. And I think to
Mm,
many people, even if they wouldn't connect with the idea of soul and find it too out there or woo-woo or spiritual or religious or whatever, they can connect with great art and beauty.
mm.
And that's why I always talk about this with you, but that's why I love Nick Cave's Red Hand Files so much
Yeah,
because
totally.
he's a rock star. He's had an extreme amount of grief and pain in his life, having lost both his sons. And,
Mm,
he has music playing on Peaky Blinders and all these other really popular things. And he's obviously an artist in and of itself. But I feel like he's just transcended so many pillars of society with his work.
mm,
And the Red Hand Files, I think, touches people in a deep place because it's so poignant and potent with regards to how I experience it, anyways, is writing about the fabric of life. And it's
mm,
not showy. You don't have to know him as an artist. There's no like reels and campaigns and marketing. It's like
mm,
people just write in and he just responds. And he's a religious man. He is Christian as far as I understand it. And
mm,
he writes about God and the world soul. And people write him really funny questions and questions about the existential pain that they suffer in. One of my favorite ones was a question that said, "How long will I be alone?" And it's such a beautiful one. And yeah, just find there's certain people who can cut through and do exactly what you're saying. They can um,
mm,
speak about something that the collective is feeling and knows is there, but isn't able to put into words. Like
mm,
how many people write about grief or create art about grief? It's
mm,
kind of like the soul in some ways. It's very hard to describe in words. Like you said earlier, it's a human to human thing, but it's hard to explain.
mm,
And I think grief is something that touches us all, but it's such a potent elixir for artistry because it can be teased apart in a way that's so relevant to the human condition and is so hard for people to explain or wrap their head around.
mm.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Red Hand files is really interesting, I feel, because it's like it brings in something it bridges that line between the personal and the universal. And I feel there's a certain power to the artist where I think, yeah, I feel like one of the reasons why something like that is so beautiful is because
mm,
it he's not on a pedestal. There's something that's like
mm,
I'm just like you. I'm just a member of the human family, but he's also not. He's Nick Cave, you know?
mm,
So there's something that's so yeah, ironic about that almost he has the power, or if Bob Dylan, or if, I think in a way, I don't know much about her, but I think I hear a lot around that's why Taylor Swift is so popular because because of the power of who they are individually,
Mm,
when and there's a conscious choice that goes into the deeply human and the personal realms, it's like they carry weight
mm,
to reach those places as well,
mm,
because I feel like anybody could do the red hand files, but it wouldn't have the same gravity
mm,
in a cave doing it, you know? So
mm,
yeah, and I feel there's something in that that really touches me as well, that in a way I just imagine often when I read the red hand files that so many places where maybe people feel isolated or like disconnected, just one little letter can go such a long way just by getting a
yeah.
response in a cave, you know, or I'd like to think that at least.
Mm. I'm so sad about the way that we don't write physical letters to each other anymore in this
Mm,
society. Like,
yeah, me
I would
too.
love, I would love there to be a revolution that
Mm,
changes that because I just think there's something so
mm,
magical about capturing something, even innocuous, in
yeah,
form that's not on a
mm,
screen.
yeah.
Yeah. Is it important for you to kind of create away from the screen? Like, do you feel that there's like a big difference between
Mm,
accessing something through the medium of a computer, which is very much now kind of running our lives, and through just being,
yeah,
I don't know, in your cabin with your guitar?
yeah, totally. Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, in many ways, I feel like the best way to confront your own creativity is just journal and then write on the typewriter or the rather the computer screen. But I know for me, like, yeah, there've been significant chunks of time where I felt something very different in my body of like, you know, the process of me having an idea and feeling like an essay is on its way or some post or poem. It's such a different it's like something takes me over that's so different if I'm on my keyboard
mm,
versus when I had a typewriter versus handwriting it. And oftentimes most of the stuff I feel is the truest is the stuff that's come through on the typewriter or
mm,
handwriting.
mm,
Yeah. I've often felt, you know, um with stories or feeling like there's definitely at some point a novel in me but I feel the longer stuff if I really wanted it to be true I think I'd handwrite it
mm,
um because yeah it's an entirely different process. I feel like something so unfiltered
mm.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon discipline is actually a really critical part of creativity in this day and age.
Mm.
I know that for
Yeah.
myself, like just faffing
Mm.
around, working or just faffing on the laptop just drains the current of
Yeah.
life just so
Yeah.
immediately. And
Mm.
yeah, I feel similar. I kind of can feel certain things coming to me over time and I can feel the life in them. And
Mm.
sometimes I just let it go, and I shouldn't. I like it just kind of wafts away. And actually, if I was more
Mm.
disciplined and I don't know, just stopped where I was, even if I was on a walk in the woods and just wrote what was
Yeah.
there, what was alive. I really used
Mm.
to find that when I used to do a lot of hiking, I would always think, I'd be like
Mm.
writing something in my head, and then by the time I get home, it's gone. And kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
maybe I should like get a little notebook, and just stop and lean against a tree because
Yeah.
sometimes not everything has to come into form.
Mm.
Um, I listened to Maya Luna once talking about her creative process, and she wrote one of her most popular poems where she had felt it coming in for months and months, like little
Mm.
whispers of what it wanted to be. And then one day she was with a friend, and maybe I've told you this before. She was with a
Mm.
friend and she was talking to him, and she was like, it's like that moment when you really need a shit. Like it was just there, and she's like, I have to go. Bye. And just like he's in some big
Mm.
process and she's trying to hold space for him. She was like, no, I'm sorry, I have to go. And she just ran back to her
Oh.
house and sat down and just and the whole thing just
Mm.
came flying out of her. And I love
Mm.
that, like that
Yeah.
radical commitment to the art. Like, nah,
Yeah.
this poem has
Yeah.
been brewing and gestating in my inner world, and it's here now, and I'm going to attend to it.
Yeah. 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 Sometimes I feel like the the deity or something itself of the poem or of is saying like, create me, I want to come
Mm,
through.
mm,
Yeah, maybe I don't know. I mean, I'm not a father, but when I've heard people talk about like a soul wanting
mm,
to come through and screaming, I feel that sometimes
mm,
too, where it's like
mm,
things have a life of their own where they want to be
mm,
created. They don't at all want you to think about if it's going to go on Facebook or what the result is or if it's going to make money or whatever. And I can
mm,
feel that yeah, I mean even the total synchronicity, but also feels quite chaotic of like having very specific memories of when a specific riff will come through in the guitar. And then sometimes I'll just hum it in the shower and then it'll go away for a year or two. And then 3 or 4 years later, it comes back. And now,
mm,
boom, that's a song that comes through in
mm,
2 to 4 hours. Like it's so wild how,
mm,
and I think honoring those the discipline of tracking those moments because there's the rhythmic discipline, but the discipline of catching those moments and being like, I don't know why or for who or what, but nothing else matters besides this. Like that act of owning our creative nature feels so radical and so rare and so
mm,
vulnerable and
mm,
and and even though that can feel like it belongs to the artist or it's chaotic, like for me, that's how truth comes through,
mm,
something other than humans banging their heads together to make decisions around
mm,
around things that require a very different process, and we yeah,
mm,
and we've obviously been in many group explorations together around like how are decisions made and what are we listening to and what's between all the voices and opinions and in a way I feel like going back to the piece of like the madness of the artist and almost the drug addict, I feel like a lot of the times I feel the being of society kind of like a bit of a Frankenstein thing in the same way that
mm,
we've learned to love dogs so much, but we're also the ones that have domesticated the dogs. I feel like we as society have done the same thing to the artist, where the artist, including myself, like grows up knowing in ourselves the kind of compulsive, nervous state of the starving artist of, yeah, some parallel life. I could have easily been that
mm,
guy living in the streets of New York, having a really good life, honestly, like living in the
mm,
sewers beneath New York City and finding community and writing poems and um but I feel the artist like was it the chicken or the egg? What came first? The starving artist. I feel like what the artist creates is coming from a paradigm that's not valued in society. So
mm,
the artist trying to survive, struggling to bring something through. I feel like a sign of it being potent is that it's meant to come through and challenge the very paradigms and norms that are very survival based that
mm,
we're living in culture. So
mm,
in a way, it feels like a healthy trickster energy. Or I
mm,
remember this book over here, Trickster Makes the World, that's so good by this guy Lewis Hyde, and he gives this example about the con man, like the myth of the con man, particularly in America, and a beautiful woman in the bar and she meets this guy and next thing you know they're in the hotel room and this beautiful romance happens and then she's out of $40,000 or something because he convinced her and
mm,
and and he goes in this book and says like there's something about healthy conscious trickster energy where
mm,
it doesn't actually operate, and I feel this with healthy artists, like it's a rebel, but it's meant to bring people
mm,
to their edges of a boundary, or like an offensive stand-up comedian where you're at a boundary that's crossed and you're very upset and or offended, but then somewhere something inside is actually very relieved that you've been
yeah,
brought to that boundary to
mm,
even show you that it exists. So
mm,
I feel that, yeah, I feel that place you were speaking about in stand-up comedy, whatever that is, like basically has driven my whole life around like what is the edge? Why in that moment that
mm,
person, their psyche gets offended, but that
mm,
person doesn't? And
mm,
what is that edge that we're all living on where we're just like
mm.
waiting for collapse to happen inside of us and outside of us? And and is it not the job of the soul, or which I feel is the artist, to basically, yeah, contribute to that, and not
Mm,
in a way that's cruel, but in a way that is also very attuned to the times and the
mm,
ripeness and the rhythm pacing of, when to say that thing, or when, yeah, if we're in our isolation creating art, how are we supposed to know even the meaning of what's radical and not, if we're not
mm,
actually taking the risk to bring it forward?
mm,
And so I feel there's always been something in me, and I think in a lot of beings who know they're very creative, that like some part of me feels like I suffer if I'm not bringing things into full
mm,
manifestation.
mm,
But then some other piece has been very much in self-sabotage a lot of my life, and
mm,
like resisted bringing what lives in me into full
mm,
manifestation, because then I'm afraid that it'll make me the creator of that thing, even
mm,
though I know it's universal. But
mm,
that's been a lot of my own journey on a personal note
mm,
of like, and I feel like I'm just about there right now, actually, in this point of my life, like now choosing as individual Jonathan that, okay, maybe it's time I actually call myself an artist, or,
mm,
accept that there are things that do come through me as well, and not just fall
mm,
back on like, well, it's the world soul and I'm a
mm.
universal being, blah, blah, blah. So yeah,
Yeah.
but I feel the longing in me for the next clear sign that some new renaissance is here, because at least
Mm,
in those times it's very much a group effort, and there's
mm,
not like artists having to stand alone, even though I still think that's part of the game. But
mm,
um yeah, anyway, different
mm.
threads there. But yeah.
No, it's interesting because I think there's a few kind of themes, and one is the of them is
Mm,
around purity. And
mm,
some of the other things that we love to talk about is power and leadership and soul
mm,
and all these different things. And at the core of it is what really turns me on is purity. People doing
mm.
things from a place of purity, not because it makes money or because anyone's watching or because
Yeah.
it means that you're going to get somewhere in your career or all of that um,
Mm,
kind of societal measuring and
mm.
attaining that we do. Actually, great art, it just wants to exist. It just wants to come through. It doesn't really care
Yeah.
who or how or whatever. And I think much like accessing soul in our society, we have to actually forcibly extract ourselves from the conditioned way
Mm,
of living
yeah.
to, not always, but often to be able to find out who we really are on a deep, deep, deep level. And then to stay true to who we really are on a deep level then requires consistent maintenance. Once you extract yourself, it's very alluring to come back in.
Yeah.
And, it's not like a game of black and white, but there definitely has to be a process of continuing to unpeel the layers of
Mm,
how we can be seductively pulled back into something that's not necessarily in the alignment of what we're really here for.
yeah,
And I think
totally.
creativity is just a micro example of a macro picture where
Mm,
so many people must feel under pressure to pump out Instagram content and reels and,
mm,
like create something. And there's a lot
mm,
of people that do it beautifully, and it's a
mm,
necessary part of life sometimes.
mm,
But that pressure on great art to come and be something for us, to
mm,
sell our course or show that we're, made the next level stage of development or that we're the best,
mm.
whatever out there, and you can now be a confidence coach too, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's That's what I love to get underneath because
Yeah.
there's kind of a theme of what I've been talking about a lot in these conversations is how to be in the world, like
Mm,
selling my work. I speak for myself, selling my work, um, explaining what I'm doing online, trying to reach people who want to hear me, and
mm,
coming from a place of purity that's like, I'm here, like if you want me, and not
mm,
from a place of trying to make something happen. And
mm,
I just think, Tracy Emin, I don't know whether you know the Unmade Bed of Tracy Emin.
mm.
Um,
No.
she's a British artist, and she creates many different things, but one of the most famous things she did was she created this it was her bed, unmade bed, and it had like dirty knickers and various different things, and it was basically like the state of the morning after, and
mm,
um and it became so famous because it cut through
mm,
something, exactly what you're saying, in the collective psyche or consciousness that knows that place of
mm,
despair and eroticism and all the things that were in that scene. And I read her memoir once, and yeah, she's an amazing person, but
mm,
also had a rough life. You know, a lot of people that make great art, they've lived on the fringes of existentialism, which makes them
mm,
able to see through, like I was talking about before. And yeah, I was very
mm,
inspired by her.
mm,
Yeah, she's definitely left a stamp on, I imagine,
mm,
global art, but the British artist scene for sure.
mm. I just
Mm.
thought of when you were speaking about her, just the image of Fleabag came to mind instantly.
Oh,
Just feels
so
like
good.
similar, yeah, maybe a bit more modern or something, but yeah. Yeah, and I feel that's, in a way, when you have an encounter with someone, and I remember feeling this a lot as a kid. My mom's from New York, so just being going to New York all the time, and now I have a very love-hate relationship with New York, but New York is I mean, yeah, there's nowhere like it. And I remember having so many encounters with people on the train and bookshops on the street, just so many, thousands and thousands of interactions of like so many people who spoke to me in some way. And this has always been happening my whole life. I mean, I feel like it's always right there if we want to experience that sense of the creative act of just human community. We don't need to
Mm.
walk down the street and look at our phone and pretend like no one exists around us. Like we're a family, and um I just lost my train of thought.
About New York.
New York and Tracy Emin. Yeah. Anyway, lost it. It might come back.
Maybe it'll come back in 4 years in the shower,
Yeah.
like your
Yeah. Yeah.
song.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just reminded of when you kind of disappeared off to the nearby town to make friends with the bookshop owner there,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that about you. I'm definitely
Mm,
someone who isn't so like talk to
mm,
me. Well, I'm
mm,
always, I
mm,
feel like I'm kind of watching from the sidelines a bit more, but I'm
mm,
always inspired by people who
mm,
have in-depth meetings on a plane or
mm.
yeah, these are really, I guess,
Yeah.
they're so
Mm,
archetypal that they get fictionalized. Like New York, for example, is so archetypal and it's been fictionalized so much throughout movies and culture. And going
yeah.
to places like that feels like you're already stepping into a film. And I think it
Totally.
creates permission, for non-New Yorkers to go and be tourists there and just kind of pretend for a while that you're in some scene.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
there's a magic about that.
Yeah.
Mm,
Actually, yeah, that thing it just came back.
mm,
Having those, I was gonna say, having those interactions in a way, I feel like the same way that conscious or not, I mean, everybody, no doubt, everybody can look back through their lives and remember, even if it comes faintly in some dream or whatever, can remember interactions or little moments where like something speaks to the soul, whether that's
mm,
through nature or a human or a stranger or whatever. And I feel like the thing about art is if I used to think about this all the time when I was doing theater, that like if you're yeah, watching a play unfold or many people are sitting in a cinema watching the same film or the same art exhibit or whatever, it, it's it's dangerous in a way that that one thing can affect a whole room of people in
mm,
various different ways silently, and nobody will ever talk about it. Maybe they will.
mm,
Maybe people will go home and have a chat, but I feel like when something inside of us gets touched by the world outside of us,
mm,
that power is like the most precious thing I feel, and
mm,
and and it turns me on that someone could just have one encounter with someone on the subway in New York, or see that film like you were saying, or read a book where like a character speaks to them on an archetypal level, and they just cannot shake how much that affected them for
Mm,
years and years and years. And it's like then this whole life is being constructed, but that one moment
mm,
can have such an impact on people. And I feel like
mm,
that kind of mycelium of invisibility that's happening is just for me, that's the creative act of
mm,
something, like something is trying to birth, and things are trying to be said that are unsaid.
mm,
And whether that's speaking to each other as humans or creating art, or I often felt
mm,
that when I never really understood writer's block, but I do feel a lot of times I know on some level that it's just good for me if I'm journaling every
mm,
morning. And oftentimes I don't. And I feel it's often very scary to journal, because then you're manifesting an artifact of something that lives inside of you, and now it's on the outside, and it
mm,
has to be a little more lived than it was if you kept it in. So
mm,
yeah, like that all just feels so revolutionary to me. And
mm,
feel that's where we're at now collectively, that
mm,
things just can't be kept inside anymore, whether that's
mm,
the beauty, creativity of the soul, and also the darkest corridors of our shadows, and things that are under the surface of what's really been running power for a long time, that
mm,
but he kind of knows but doesn't want to talk about. Like all
mm,
of that I feel is just bubbling now. And
mm,
so yeah, I think especially how creativity can be such a saving grace
mm,
for very difficult times as well, whether
mm,
that's individually or collectively.
mm,
Yeah, I feel like it just binds us so
mm.
deeply.
Yeah, totally. And we can get lost in art in a way that we might not feel met by our friends or family or people
Mm,
around us.
yeah.
Yeah, I was reminded as you were talking of, I went to a Radiohead cover band
Right. Wow.
In Wellington once, this random band from the east coast of New Zealand. And I just was like, I love Radiohead, I'm gonna go. And by the time it finished, like the lights came on, and I'm just like standing, in prayer like this, and I just basically cried for 2 hours straight. Like
Mm,
not with anybody I know, just there's something about that night and that music and that it just blew me apart. And I've had a few moments like that where, I mean, I'm a big Radiohead fan, but there's something so unique and magical about that book at that time or reading that page
yeah.
at that moment and
Mm,
being connected to certain songs. Like, yeah, there's a few songs that they just they
mm,
they kind of help me remember what it is to be human. And
mm.
I remember when I took LSD for the first time, I was like, wow, this is what everyone was writing the songs about. Like it just I really
Mm,
yeah, like a big veil came off in that experience. And I suddenly was like, this is what the Stones meant. Like, there's just something
yeah.
revealed to me.
Yeah. It's very, very, very relatable, that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Ah, I feel like we could go on forever, but I'm conscious that
yeah, totally.
feels like we're finding a natural pause, and
Mm,
also maybe everyone doesn't want to watch really long YouTube
yeah,
interviews anymore.
most likely.
We're very
Yeah.
over screened in our life. But
Mm,
yeah, is there
mm.
anything you want to say or share before we complete?
Mm. No, yeah, I just feel excited around having this chat and kind of drilling into these questions, and yeah, contemplations that I feel are for me are quite easy to take for granted.
Mm,
Yeah, because I think for me there's just a joy of having this conversation around the nature of creativity, the source of it. Feels like it's kind of drilling into our origins a bit in ways that we
mm,
still can't even really know or understand. But
mm,
I feel grateful to have the
mm.
chat.
Yeah, and if anybody's watching this who feels like they are not an artist or they shouldn't be writing because they're not good enough or You don't want to be
Yeah.
seen. Like, just do it. Do it.
Yeah. Not true. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. Sending you
Mm.
much love. Mm,
Yeah. Thank you. Mm.
ciao.